front lobby. But did you know that when he was 12 years old, his father was arrested and put in jail because he had debt to the baker? So Dickens went into a shop and was employed as a shoe blackener for 10 hours a day, 6 days a week for a while his family was able to repay some of the debt and get his father out of jail. Well, the experience was so stressful for Dickens that even though years later, when he became a very wealthy man, he never stopped writing about those that were underprivileged and those who had such hard working conditions back in his time. Well, I learned all of this because on Christmas Eve, I was part of a service at the Fox Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship where they creatively decided to juxtapose the Gospel according to Luke of the Jesus birth that you'd read on Christmas Eve with A Christmas Carol from Charles Dickens. And it was actually quite creative and a lot of fun to do. And so the three of us that were leading the service had to take different parts, different characters from A Christmas Carol and do a reflection on it. So for example, one was Jacob Marley, came in chains, lightly costumed it was called, came in chains and talked about regrets. And likewise, on the flip side, nephew Fred came in and talked about hope. And then Scrooge came at the very end after he was transformed, of course, and talked about joy. And I had purposely chosen the three ghosts to do my reflection. And it was all about being introspective and reflecting and really a focus on being mindful about what's going on in the world and how you react to it. Well, at the time when I was preparing for this reflection, I knew also I was going to be doing this sermon on January 2nd. And so it made me suddenly realize and look at A Christmas Carol in a different way, particularly the character of Scrooge, that Scrooge is all about goals. I mean, Dickens wrote very black and white kind of characters here. So Scrooge has one goal in life, accumulating wealth. As much wealth as possible. We don't really get a sense of what he's going to do with all this wealth. He lives in a big house, but he doesn't even turn on the heat and he eats gruel for dinner. I mean, he's even miserable. So it seems like his only goal was to accumulate more and more of it and spend as little of it as possible. By contrast, the characters of Nephew Fred and Bob Cratchit are the opposite. One is wealthy, Fred's wealthy, and Bob Cratchit is not, but they seem to have their lives set with intention. That they don't seem to have any goals at all that we can decipher in A Christmas Carol, but they certainly live with the intention to spread joy and hope and happiness to the world no matter what. Because each of them are brave enough to wish Mr. Scrooge a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year every year and invite him to dinner and be ready for, incoming wrath of bah humbug and, are there no prisons and that kind of stuff. So it just dawned on me that that was one story with good example of the difference. And the reason I told you that today is because when I started working on this sermon, I realized that I wasn't sure I knew what intentions meant. So because of Karen Schuppe and a lot of her mindfulness practices that I've now joined, I'm spending a lot more time in meditation. And often it's an app on a phone. And often the beginning of the meditation period, they'll say, I'd like you to set an intention for this meditation. And I immediately go to goal. I don't know what an intention is without it being a goal. And so when I tripped into this reading, I thought, whoops, I think I've got some work to do here to understand it. And so that's one of the things I'm realizing is this goal has an outcome and you're very much attached to what it is, whereas an intention is just living your life according to your values. That's what Phillip Moffitt told us in the reading earlier. So I want to go further into Phillip Moffitt's reading because I think it's astounding what he had to say. And it's actually pretty short. If any of you want to go out on the website, it's, let me just give you the reference for it again because I know people ask for it often after I'm done reading. It is called The Heart's Intention by Phillip Moffitt, and it's in dharmawisdom.org. So after he gets done talking about the difference between goals versus intentions, he gives us 4 different key points in this, and they're each a little bit divergent, but I found them quite interesting. So number 1 was doing the groundwork, which is really saying, really understand your intentions and the illusions of a goal. And this one hit me square between the eyes because it's my annual time of year to tell myself I am now, once and for all, finally going to get that body of a 22-year-old that I've always wanted. This is going to be the year, right? And it doesn't help that social media floods me with workout gear that, by the way, is really expensive these days. And of course, these models work out all day long and they look fantastic. And I automatically fall into that illusion that if I just buy that one piece of clothing and put it on, my body's instantly going to look like that. Okay, so fortunately, I'm an adult enough that I don't go buy that stuff and put myself into the poorhouse. But there's something in the back of my head that just wants that to be true. And as Buddhism would say, that's purely an illusion, and it's not even trying to fake it, right? But there is that thing every time of year that I really want to get in there and go work out, and this is going to be my year to really look awesome and have everybody be jealous, right? Well, that's clearly a goal, and it's an illusionary goal, and I'm likely to fail on it like I do every year. And so I thought, well, what actually is my intention there? Because I don't really have a life intention to be stunningly model, whatever. I don't know what the term of that would be, that I just walk around looking really fabulous. I realize, and this should be no duh for everybody listening today, my intention is to serve. I went to seminary to be a minister. This has been a lifelong goal, if you will, but it is one of my life's intention to serve other people and to be in ministry. And so therefore, there is a physical and mental component to that of exercise, because I'm not a spring chicken, and as I age, things begin to just sort of fall apart. As my physical therapist says, just keep moving. It doesn't matter what you do, just keep moving. So I'm entering this year, instead of a goal to look like a 22-year-old Adonis, to say, my goal is to be able to continue to serve in the way I do for years to come. And to do that, I need to exercise both my body and my brain, which is a much more realistic goal. Now, Moffat has a couple of quotes here that I want to share with you. He says, goals never fulfill you in an ongoing way. Clearly, mine doesn't. They either beget another goal or else collapse, which is usually what happens to me. However, he adds this. He said, they do provide excitement, the ups and downs of life, but intention is what provides you with self-respect and peace of mind. So that's number 1, doing the groundwork. Number 2, he calls it misusing good intentions. I'm not sure that I understand the misusing part, but he's basically saying if you're grounded in good intentions, you respond differently when provoked. So he's kind of saying there's this side benefit to grounding your life in intentions, is that you're probably going to flow through your life a little bit easier. So he gives an example of someone who's incredibly rude at work. Now, I know lots of us aren't employed full-time, so it's somebody who's incredibly rude anywhere. And these days, with the political scene out there, that can seem to happen often. Social media, say it that way. So often, we see that, hear that, read that, and we tense up, or at least I do, and I think, well, my God, that's just outrageous. And something in me, and now I'm too polite a person to ever really do this, except once I can think I did in a bank, but somebody says something that I think is just rude, and I just hold my tongue, but what I want to do is some really smart aleck response back at him, and then Moffat says, you might even want to get physical, I guess slap him or something like that. He said, but if you're living with intention, you kind of put a little hold on that. He says, at that point, he says, you see their insecurity and how desperately hungry they are for control and attention. You notice only your needs and dislike and take his behavior personally because you can't just distance yourself from it, even though whatever they just said probably had little to do with you at that moment. So Moffat says, if you're grounded in your intention, then your response will be to notice this discomfort and your own suffering and feel compassion towards both of you. I think that's a tall order. The example I have in a bank, and I won't go into the details, I responded back. It was somebody that didn't want to wear their mask, right? And I responded back with a snippy answer, and then he started being snippy with me, and I started being snippy with him. And the last thing I did was think about each of our discomfort and feel compassion towards both of us. So to me, that's a tall order. But what Moffat says is, if you're in that space, living with your intentions, it opens up extra emotional space as an orientation as you move through life. And you have a greater range of options for interpreting the difficulties in your life. So that's point number 2, misusing good intentions, or using good intentions, I would say. The third was pretty straightforward and obvious. It's called sowing karmic seeds. And it's the whole idea, whether you believe in karma or not, whether you believe that something you did in your past life is affecting your current life and this life will affect the future life, it's that ripple effect. That no matter what you put out into the universe, bad energy, good energy, it's going to come back to get you some way. There's no way it can't, because we're all interconnected, and basically what you sow, you reap. But then what he's saying is there's this thought to reflect on what is seldom mentioned. Whatever is manifesting itself in your life right now is affected by how you receive it. And how you receive it is largely determined by your intention at this moment. So in other words, he's talking about karma, not just throwing it out there, but as things come at you, the intention with which you receive it has a big impact on how you take it in and how you feel it. So I thought that was an interesting point, that it kind of goes both ways. And then his fourth point in this short essay was developing resolve. And I finally went, aha, now we can get to that New Year's resolution that we were talking about. And he says, through practicing right resolve, you learn to set your mind to maintaining your values and your priorities, and to resist the temptation to sacrifice your values for material or ego gain. You gain the ability to consistently hold your intentions no matter what arises. In other words, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to try to learn how to just be physically able to move on with my life. But there's going to be that 22-year-old muscle dude in the mirror lifting weights. And I'm going to have that momentary, kind of thing. And so if I'm living with my intentions and remembering why I'm there, I can just let it pass and move on and get through my workout in the way I should, which is more likely that I'll come back the next day and do what I need to do. So what Moffat ends with is saying, if you make right intention then a goal, so this gets back to this goal setting thing, then you're grasping at spiritual materialism. So don't make it a goal. Just right intention should be just right intention. It's simply about coming home to yourself. It's a practice of aligning with the deepest part of yourself while surrendering to the reality that you often get lost in your wanting mind. All right, so that's basically what Moffat had to say, and it's kind of a lot of little key points that are all over the place. So what's the takeaway here? I think Unitarian Universalists are intrinsically called to live with intention. So this month's theme makes a lot of sense. So contrast our faith with other faiths that are out there, particularly the ones we talk about a lot, the ones that get a lot of press, the mega churches, the evangelicals kind of thing. From my perspective, they're very goal-oriented, right? They're outwardly focused on converts. I know for a fact there's a mega church in Appleton that has a stated goal to have 10% of the city's population. I mean, the church already has 10,000 members, so it's probably pretty accurate for them. I don't know. Then these churches, they're building monuments to themselves to kind of see how big we are, the technology that goes in there. And then often they're ensuring that society is confined to their narrow constraints, that whatever their beliefs are, they have a goal to make sure the rest of society goes along with what they want. Whereas by contrast, we're very individualistic. We're very introspective. And so I think it makes sense for us. It's a natural way to go. And Moffat says there are only two things you are responsible for in this practice. Throughout each day, ask yourself if you're being true to your deepest intentions. So ask yourself, and then if you're not, start doing so as immediately as best you can. So always be mindful of it and try to correct it as quickly as you can. Reconnect to your intention. And by doing that, you're working towards finding your own authenticity and freedom. And if there were ever two words that I would describe a Unitarian Universalist, it's living authentically, and then we really tout religious freedom. So living authentically and freedom are really what we're about, and this makes a lot of sense to me. In that moment, you're remembering yourself and grounding your life in your heart's intention, or as he says, you are living the noble life of the Buddhist's teachings. So at this point, Michael, if you could share the screen again and put the slide up with the discussion questions, I want to talk about that and close out with this. Give them a minute to get there while I get a drink of water. There we go. All right, so when I was talking about discussion questions, I originally wrote these the opposite way, because I wanted to say, so what are your goals? What have you decided to do for New Year's resolutions? And then, well, so are they tied to your intentions? But that's not what this sermon was about. The sermon was prioritizing intentions. So I think if you're Unitarian Universalist, you're probably pretty good at living with intentions. Like maybe you choose to do no harm. Maybe you want to help build a better world. Maybe you want to be connected with people out there, bring joy and happiness to the world. We tend to think that way just generally. So what are your intentions, or what are the intentions you're focusing on as we go into the new year? And then how are they aligned with your goals? So go back to my workout example again. What are my intentions for the new year? My intentions are to continue to provide effective ministry. And to be providing effective ministry, I have to be physically and mentally able to do that. And so my goal is to continue to exercise my brain, my spirit, and my body so that I'm able to do that, which is a much more realistic goal than trying to look like the 22-year-old Adonis. So that's what I want for the discussion questions. And I'm going to give you some time to think about it while we have our sending song. What are your intentions, just generally? It doesn't, hopefully they're beyond just the new year. And then have you set any goals for yourself this year that align with those intentions? So thank you. And I'm looking forward to the discussion and hearing what you have to say. So then at this point, let's go to our sending song. It is We Would Be One, number 318. And I just want to lift up the first verse, because I've sang this hymn for years, and I just thought of it as some sort of grandiose, democratic ideal kind of thing. And today, because of where I was thinking for this sermon, the words suddenly had new meaning. So the first verse is this: we would be one as now we join in singing. We're doing this collectively. We're singing our hymn of love, comma, now to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are. And so we're basically pledging ourselves to really get in there and do the groundwork of understanding who we are and what in us is true. So suddenly this hymn had a little bit to do with finding our intention